Good morning.
Good morning.
It's good to see all of you. We are in our fourth week of our series called Get Wisdom. And we have looked primarily at the book of Proverbs. So let's jump right in this morning and just go right back to the very beginning. Proverbs chapter 1. Let's look at the first few verses. The Proverbs of Solomon, son of David, king of Israel, for gaining wisdom and instruction, for understanding words of insight, for receiving instruction in prudent behavior, doing what is right and just and fair, for giving prudence to those who are simple, knowledge and discretion to the young. Let the wise listen and add to their learning, and let the discerning get guidance. For understanding proverbs and parables, the sayings and riddles of the wise. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. Today, we're going to talk about that idea found in that last verse, the fear of God. The fear of the Lord, that last verse says, is the beginning of knowledge. It's the beginning of knowledge. Now, this phrase, the fear of the Lord, is found lots of places throughout Proverbs. And just a few. Let's just run through a few. Proverbs 8:13. To fear the Lord is to hate evil. I hate pride and arrogance, evil behavior, and perverse speech. Proverbs 9:10. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and knowledge of the Holy One is understanding. Proverbs 10:27. The fear of the Lord adds length to life, but the years of the wicked are cut short. Proverbs 14:26 and 27. Whoever fears the Lord has a secure fortress, and for their children it will be a refuge. The fear of the Lord is a fountain of life, turning a person from the snares of death. Proverbs 15:33. Wisdom's instruction is to fear the Lord, and humility comes before honor. Proverbs 16:6. Through love and faithfulness, sin is atoned for. Through the fear of the Lord, evil is avoided. Proverbs 19:23. The fear of the Lord leads to life. Then one rests content, untouched by trouble. Proverbs 22:4. Humility is the fear of the Lord. Its wages are riches and honor and life. This phrase found just in these few places in Proverbs. But if you remember when we talked in week 1, when we're talking about wisdom, Proverbs is not the only book contained in what is known as the wisdom literature. It's just one book in a collection of wisdom literature that's found in the Old Testament. It includes 2 other books, Ecclesiastes and Job. And here's the thing about those 3 books of wisdom literature. They all come at life from a sort of different perspective. They all sort of come, and there is a natural, purposeful tension that exists between all 3 of those books. And they're made to be read together and against one another, and not just kind of taken kind of by itself. The perspective that they each share is very different. Proverbs, for example, sees the world as an orderly place that operates by a certain set of good rules, and in order to get a good life, you should follow those rules. I mean, that introduction we just read at the beginning kind of laid that out. So this is what this is for. But now Ecclesiastes, its perspective of life is kind of like this. Well, all right, that's okay, but we're all going to die in the end anyway, so what's the point of good life? I mean, really, what does it matter? It's all pointless. And then when you look at Job, Job's perspective is this. Look, there's nothing good, orderly, anything in this life. Bad things happen to good people all the time. It is what it is. And if you take any of those by themselves, you get the wrong message of what wisdom is. They are meant to be read and put in tension with one another. Here is the common thread, though, amongst those 3, even though they have 3 very different perspectives on how they see life. Here's the common thread. It's the fear of the Lord. It's found in those. Matter of fact, Ecclesiastes, if you read it, and it's just life is meaningless, and you can try this and that, and it all doesn't matter. What's the point? It doesn't matter. And you get to the very end. It's got 12 chapters. The next to the last verse in Ecclesiastes, verse 13, says this. That's the whole story. Here is now my final conclusion. Fear God and obey his commands, for this is everyone's duty. Like, Solomon gets to the end of that book and says, look, it's all pointless. It's all meaningless. I've tried it all. It doesn't seem to work. It doesn't. Life is just, it's going to happen. It's a vapor. There's all these expressions like that in Ecclesiastes. He gets to the end and says, here's the end. Here's my final conclusion. Fear God. Obey his commands. Even in Job, and this verse isn't at the end, it's more kind of in the middle almost. But Job in the middle, in chapter 28, verse 28, he's talking about God, and he says this, and this is what he, referring to God, this is what he says to all humanity. The fear of the Lord is true wisdom. To forsake evil is real understanding. So even though they have very different perspectives, all three of these books of wisdom literature have a central theme that sort of comes back and says, okay, look, yeah, one's almost annihilated. One's like, yeah, it's all bad. One's like, it's all meaningless. One is, hey, follow the rules. But they all three are pretty clear on the fear of the Lord. Now here's the problem is this. The very concept of fearing the Lord, is a tough one. Maybe it's not tough for you. It's tough for me. I mean, we just finished singing a song this morning about Jesus and how he gets rid of fear. And now I'm telling you, hey, here's what we need to do. Fear the Lord. And it just seems kind of inconsistent. It's like, wait, what is it? How do we wrap our thinking around fearing a God who we know is good and merciful, loving and gracious? How do we reconcile the idea? I'm not going to put it on you. I struggle with how I reconcile this idea of preaching, of admonishing, of exhorting that we should fear the Lord, when for years I have pounded into my kids every scripture about not being afraid. About not having the spirit of fear. About perfect love casting out all fear. I will never forget the first time Nathan was bold enough and adventurous enough to ride Apollo's chariot at Busch Gardens, and it's to me still one of my favorite rides, simply because of the way they strap you in your seat, which is not very strapped in at all. Like they put something across your lap and that's it. And there's like nothing here. I want like 3 tons of weight on my shoulders. I want something holding me down. I want to feel secure. And there's nothing secure about that ride at all. It just feels like you're just hanging loose and nothing's holding you and that's part of, I guess, the experience. And Nathan was bold enough the first time he got on it, but once we got on it, boy, he was just, it's amazing. As soon as they lock you in and things starts to move, he suddenly had a change of heart. I don't think I want to do it. Well, it doesn't matter what you think now, because we ain't getting off. I mean, it's like, we're done. We're locked in. And all the way up, it's got this one hill. It's this first hill, this whole field. And I kept saying, Nathan, you have nothing to be afraid of. There's nothing to fear here. You're safe. You wouldn't be safe. It's all fear. In fact, fear is something we don't. And I started quoting scripture to Nathan, you know what the Bible said. We use those first. God has not given us a spirit of fear, but a power and love and a sound mind. Use your mind. Think about it. Sound mind. This is all. We're here. There's nothing to fear. God has not given us a spirit of fear. And I can remember that first trip up, all the way up that mountain. Nathan, God has not given us a spirit of fear. God has not given us a spirit of fear. Power and love and sound mind. God has not given us a spirit of fear. Whatever. Hey, whatever gets you through it. And I probably shouldn't have, because it's got this little fake kind of thing. It goes down and then it drops. Like it doesn't go. It's not the real drop. And I might have gone, whoa, like it was going to drop, and it didn't really drop. And he went, oh, well, that didn't drop. And then he dropped. But for a year, I've pounded my kids. Don't fear, don't fear. Perfect love. The opposite of fear is love. You're loved. You shouldn't fear. No need to fear. And the Bible tells us we should fear God. I mean, we even had evangelists come in. Remember, Rick Larisey came in a couple of years ago, told us we need to kick fear in the face. Some of y'all still have the church. I mean, I've seen you wearing it. Kick fear in the face. I mean, it's bad. We shouldn't have fear. But the scriptures that we just finished reading are pretty clear. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, of knowledge, of instruction. It gives us long life, along with rewards and riches and honor. And that phrase is not only found in wisdom literature, it's found 435 times in the Old Testament. So there's something to that we need to kind of wrestle with a little bit and try to understand, because I don't want to miss out on something because we have sort of a Pollyannic sort of mindset of, oh no, it's all bad. Well, apparently it's not all bad, or would be telling us to do it. So let's break it down. I want to look at some definitions this morning. I think maybe that'll help us a little bit. Now, here's the reality. I started to say we could, and let me just say we will at some point probably this next year do an entire series about the fear of the Lord, because it's that important and it's that extensive. For me to try to attack it here on one day is impossible. So I'm hoping just to give us a little taste, a little morsel, something that we can take and kind of maybe whet your appetite with. We will not extensively detail the fear of the Lord and everything it means in one setting. But let's start with the Hebrew definition of fear. The Hebrew definition of fear. What is that? The Hebrew word there that says, well, the group of words that are in this phrase stem from the root word, the Hebrew word. I've heard it pronounced yara or yira. And here's what it means. If you want to start filling in some blanks there in your notes, here's just a few phrases that kind of wrap up the definition of that. To fear, to honor, to worship. Respect for one in authority. An expectation for obedience. All of those concepts, all of those ideas stem out of this word that we simply translate into the English word fear. The fear of the Lord. Now, here's the thing. In Near East literature, not just even in the Old Testament or in Scripture, but just all of Near East literature, the idea of fear and love are both connected to covenant loyalty. In other words, fearing God and loving God actually go hand in hand. They work together. One is not meant to be done without the other. To fear the Lord without loving the Lord makes us like every other religious system in the world, where it's just based on fear. And we're scared to death that we're going to make it. Can we find eternity? Is there eternity? Will there be a God that will somehow let us into whatever heaven looks like? Like that kind of fear really dominates every major religious system, except for ours. That's not there because there's the love of God. But if you have the love of God without the fear of God, you lose the honor, the respect, those things, those expectations of obedience. Those things are missing, and you can go astray. I think if we're not careful, if we try to just experience the love of God without the fear of God, I suspect those are the people who one day will stand before Him and say, I did things in your name. I did miracles in your name. I did these things. And He says, I don't know you. Because to just simply the love of God without the fear, without the covenantal relationship that goes between the two, it doesn't work. There's an author named David Buring, and I like this definition he gave of the fear of the Lord. He said this: walking in the fear of the Lord means reverencing God and referencing God in all that we do. Walking in the fear of the Lord means reverencing God and referencing God in all that we do. I want to spend just a few minutes kind of unpacking that for just a little bit. Let's talk about reverencing God. What does it mean to reverence God? Two things I think are very important when it comes to reverence, if we're going to revere God. The first means knowing who he is. You can't revere something if you don't know what it is. Matter of fact, I would argue that, in a lot of major world religious systems, the problem is there is some element of reverence, and yet there is no knowing. There's no relationship. And when you have pure mandated reverence without relationship, it becomes religion. It doesn't work. So first of all, reverencing God means knowing who he is. A.W. Tozer said this: what comes to mind when you think about God is the most important thing about you. What comes to mind when you think about God is the most important thing about you. In other words, what you know about God is generally a reflection of who you are. It's important if we're going to know God. It's important to read the scriptures, to discover who God is. Something as simple as the names of God. Now, I've heard people say this, and I understand the thought that the Old Testamental names of God, all the Jehovah, names, and all those names we have on the missions thing out there, I don't need all that. I just need Jesus. I just need the name of Jesus. Well, okay, I get the idea. And I would say this: in Jesus is all of that. In Jesus is found every one of those. But it doesn't mean those names aren't important for us to discover who God is. Because the names of God are actually ways that they didn't just come out of a hat. It wasn't just like, I think we should call him Jehovah Nissi. No. I think we should call him Jehovah Shalom. No. He brought peace, and he revealed himself as peace, and so they said, oh, he's Jehovah Shalom. Yeah. He provided, and they said, oh, he's Jehovah Jireh. He was a banner to them, and so they said, oh, he's Jehovah Nissi. He was a healer to them, and they said, oh, he's Jehovah Rapha. Those names are describing who he is. So when we read the scriptures and we discover not only who he is, but his names, his deeds, what he's done, what he said, his words, all of that is contained in his word, in the scriptures. So I can't, when we talk about knowing God, that's the baseline. That's where we start. We've got to know that. And I think it's why when you find this phrase throughout the Old Testament especially, you will constantly find the fear of the Lord, some in a lot of ways attached to instruction or the scriptures or the law or those things that have to do with who he is. But we've got to discover the tension between a God, and this is why we need to know him. We've got to discover that tension that exists between a God who is both grace and wrath. He's both. A God who is jealous and yet who loves unconditionally. A God who has both mercy and justice. We've got to understand who he is. We've got to know him in all the hard ways, not just the easy ones. So knowing God through a relationship of reading his word, and not just that, but hearing his voice through prayer, through spending time in his presence, through worship. Those things keep us from believing in a God of our own creation. And when you look at every other false god, essentially, it is a God that has been made and been created out of man's idea or man's wishes, man's thoughts of what God ought to look like. Whether it's a little idol people rub for good luck, or whether it's an idol that you park in your driveway. It doesn't matter what it is. It's whatever you have kind of taken and formed it into the object of your worship and affection. Those things happen when we don't have a relationship that is built through reading his word, through listening to his voice, communicating with him in relationship. So reverencing God first means knowing who he is. But here's the second part. It also means living like we believe who he is. It's one thing to know him. It's another thing to actually live your life as if you believe he is who he is. In other words, live your life in a way that brings him glory. Live your life in a way that makes his ways irresistible to others. That not only brings him glory, but actually reveals him to others. Live your life in that way. That's why Paul was saying this over and over again. Colossians chapter 3, two different places. First, in verse 17, he says, "And whatever you do or say, do it as a representative of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks through him to God the Father." A few verses down in verse 23, "Work willingly at whatever you do, as though you were working for the Lord rather than for people." He's basically saying in this chapter, he's saying, listen, you are doing this not just for you, but you should live your life in a way that brings God glory, that makes God large, that makes him bigger. There's a reason. Listen, if it were just a t-shirt, we'd make a new shirt every week. We heard Jeff talk earlier about, people at the park and stuff. It wasn't about a shirt. It was about people walking out and living life as people who believe God is who he says he is. And when you do that, people notice. It brings God glory. Paul in 1 Corinthians 10:31 says this, "Whether you eat or drink or whatever you do it all for the glory of God." Do it all for the glory of God. Now listen, that also changes some things, because when you're doing it for God's glory, it means, and it's funny that Paul brings up, and I think that was just for me, whatever you eat or drink. And I'm like, really, Paul? You had to go there? Seriously? It's like, so he's saying, listen, it doesn't matter what you're doing in the smallest things, the things that affect you, affect your body, the things that and I'm not talking about just nutrition, but do you intentionally take things that alter who you are? Do you do things that destroy the things God has made? In other words, think about, do you glorify God in everything you do? Do you glorify God in every aspect? He starts down that trail, whether you eat or drink, or, you know what, let me just stop there. Whatever you do, do it all for the glory of God. Because the bottom line is this, it doesn't really matter, and he alludes to this back in Colossians 3:23, when he says, work as if unto the Lord and not for people. It doesn't matter what people think about you, but it does matter what they think about Jesus because of you. I've heard people kind of go through life almost in that way, when they've discovered their freedom and they're so free, they're no good to anybody, and they're like, I've stopped worrying about what people think. I don't care what people think. Well, the problem with that is we're supposed to care what people think. It's why do you care what people think? It doesn't matter what people think about you necessarily, but it does matter what they think about Jesus because of you. It does matter. So living like we believe who he is means that we walk in obedience to his commands. And that's why that phrase is attached so much to fearing the Lord. Fear the Lord, obey his commands. Fear the Lord, obey the Lord. Those kind of come together. They're kind of attached. But here's the problem. If we kind of get stuck in a mindset, and sort of that earning mindset that we can so easily get into, we think that fearing the Lord is about just obeying and doing better. I better do it right. Almost like I got to get it right or I'm in trouble. But his commands are not just rules to live by, but they are a calling to live for. Let me say that again. His commands are not rules to live by as much as they are a calling to live for. I heard this example this week, and I like this example. When you think of commands, I think of, when I even use the word commands or commandments, what pops in your head? If you're not seeing 10 on a tablet, then, that's when we hear command. Now listen, there's lots of commands in Scripture. And the 10 commandments that God gave the children of Israel, first of all, were not the first commands he gave them. But they were the most famous. They're the ones that get put on more decoupage than anything else I've ever seen. You don't know what decoupage is. You're just not. You're not one of the cool kids. Anyway, anybody else do decoupage at a VBS somewhere? Okay. Here's the second thing about the Ten Commandments. They came after deliverance, not before. The Ten Commandments were not a prerequisite for freedom. They were because of freedom. Obedience did not earn the children of Israel redemption. Redemption earned them the opportunity for obedience. Understand this. The children of Israel, imagine if Moses had gone to them with these 2 tablets and walked all through Egypt and said, okay, God wants to set us free from Pharaoh. He said he wants to set us free. He wants us to get us out of here, be out of this bondage. Here's the rules. He says, y'all start following these. And if you can follow these and get these down right, then he'll let us go. See, that's not how it happened. God set them free, redeemed them in a sense, and we know that the Exodus is a picture of redemption, of our salvation even. God set them free and said, now that you're free, I'm going to give you the opportunity to follow my commands. The assumption was, certainly you will want to, in this covenantal relationship, you will understand that along with fear, and there was plenty of fear for the Lord, you know, when God shows up on the mountain, sets it on fire, and there's smoke everywhere, and he says, hey, I'm up here, but don't come closer. I'm going to have people shoot you in the back with an arrow. That tends to instill a little fear. That tends to say, hey, I'm somebody to be revered. I'm somebody to be respected. I'm somebody, you know, that kind of established some boundaries there. He says that, and at the same time, he is fully expecting them to rush the mountain and want to know him and want to get to see him. And that's why he wasn't being mean. He was saying, I am so holy. I am so other than. I am so beyond what you can handle that it would be better for you to have one of the archers shoot you in between the shoulder blades with an arrow than for you to get too close to me. It was really a protection for them. But he thought, certainly after setting you free from bondage, from decades of bondage, that you will want to rush the mountain and come see me. Certainly you'll want to know me. But you can't. Ultimately, though, the Ten Commandments were not rules to live by. They were actually a revelation of his character. God was giving them not so much just rules. They were rules, but they weren't just commandments. He was actually unpacking who he was to them in the commandments. So he's basically, if we go back to this definition we're using of reverencing God, it's knowing God, and it's also living like we believe it, and obeying his commands and following him. And God is saying to them, if we're going to work in this, and you're going to have the proper reverence for me, you need to know who I am. So he said to them, have no other gods before me. Yeah, that was the rule, but what he was saying is, I am sovereign. I am the only God. Have no other gods. Have no graven images before me. No, what he was saying is, I transcend creation. You can't reduce me to an image. I am transcendent. I go beyond that. He said, do not take my name in vain. What he was really saying is, listen, you need to understand, I'm holy. I'm other than anything else. When you cry out to me, it needs to mean something. He even said to them, remember the Sabbath day. Keep it holy. What he was really saying, you need to understand that I am a God of creativity, of rest. I'm a God, I am creator God. I created the Sabbath. Honor your father and mother. That's a good rule. That's a good rule to follow. But what he was really saying is, I am the very definition of love. I created that entire way of bringing children into the world. That's how I created you to see love. I created you for community. I placed you in community. It is a picture and type of who I am. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. So honor that relationship. He told them, don't murder. Yes, don't murder. That's a good thing. But what he was really saying is, I am all about life. I am a God of life and life abundantly. I am all about life, so don't kill, don't murder. He told them not to commit adultery. What he was really revealing to them is, I am a God who is faithful. So you should live in your relationships like I am with you. He told them not to steal. That's not a bad thing, right? I mean, that's a foundational kind of principle of any civilized society. Don't steal. Don't take stuff that's not yours. But it was more than that. It was him saying, I am your provider. I will provide for all of your needs. You don't need to steal. He said, don't lie. Don't bear false witness. And what he was really saying was, I am truth. And the truth will set you free. You need to be about truth, not bearing false witness. And then finally he said, don't covet what everybody else has. And that's a good principle. That's something that probably, if we followed that one commandment, it would shut down probably half the social media platforms that exist. If it weren't for coveting, I'm not sure what we would use that for. But what he was really saying and revealing to them was, I am sufficient. I am all you need. I am sufficient for everything you have. You should be content. See, his character is behind every one of those commands. And reverencing God means to walk in obedience because we know who he is and we live like we believe it. That is ultimately the first element of fearing the Lord. But there's a second one. We not only reverence God, but we reference God. So the next couple of minutes, I just want to talk about what does that mean, referencing God. Referencing God. And that doesn't mean where you're constantly trying to sound more spiritual because you're referencing God in some of your conversation. I mean, I know people that's their only reference for God. It's, they make sure and let you know that they are all about God, and it doesn't matter what the conversation. Here's the first thing, though, that we mean by that. Referencing God means, one, he is our reference point. He is our reference point. It means we seek him and trust him because he is our compass, as it were. Listen, when we navigate the wilderness of life, we need to know, what are your reference points? You need reference points. Anybody, and I'm out of my element here because this me, me and nature. We do not have a good thing going on. I mean, I'm just not a big nature person. But some of you are. Some of you like nature. Anybody willing to admit that? I actually enjoy being in nature. Somewhat around. Yeah, okay. Yeah, you enjoy that. Some of you actually will go for a walk in places and you don't know where you're going. Any of you crazy enough to do that? You've done that before? Sort of? I mean, yeah. Yeah. God bless you. You keep me on my knees, that's for sure. I don't understand that, but that's very common. People do. Well, when you do that, though, you do. I said that. Some of you were hesitant to raise your hand. What do you mean I don't know where I'm going? Even if you're going somewhere you've never been before, you generally have reference points. You have something to help guide you. Something. There's some guideposts, some anchors, as it were. Maybe a map, or some kind of reference idea. I know, Barb. It's like maybe I have a map. I heard this story this week. I like this story. Anybody ever heard of an incredible discoverer named Lieutenant George DeLong? Anybody? Yeah. You know why you haven't heard of him? Because in 1879, he decided he was going to discover the North Pole. And he got a crew together, had a ship, had all the preparations. And there were several people during this time period, late 1800s, early 1900s. That was a big thing. It was these Arctic expeditions. They were all trying to get to the North Pole. And he got everything together he needed. He even had a map. But his map made the basic assumption that at the North Pole, there was an open Arctic sea like an open, like water, like there was an open sea at the North Pole. Now, here's the problem. That wasn't accurate. That map that he had, I don't know who wrote it, who drew it up, the cartographer that put that in place, they didn't know what they were talking about. And it was wrong. But he and his crew continued to trust in that map. And so every time they would hit ice, they would plow and dig and try to break through, thinking that if we're gonna finally get to where this ice ends and we'll be in the open polar sea, and then we'll find the North Pole. That wasn't there. And so because of that, then every time they hit a problem, every time they ran into an obstacle, they refused to change course because they were convinced the map, the reference point they had was accurate, was right. They refused to change their strategy because they were trusting in a map that was faulty. And that faulty map eventually led to the destruction of the entire mission and even the death of several of the crew, including Lieutenant DeLong himself, died in that expedition. Now, in 1908, and I did some research in this because I was reading this and I was like, there's a guy named Dr. Frederick Cook. And I thought, that don't sound right. I don't think that's the guy. I thought the guy that discovered the North Pole was an admiral. And I went to searching and I found Admiral Peary. That's who discovered the North Pole, right? Well, I did some research and found out Admiral Peary had a really good political campaign. That most people believe that Dr. Cook actually did find the North Pole a year before. But Admiral Peary was more influential, more powerful, had more money, enough that all of Dr. Cook's proof he left with a captain to take back so they could line up all his data. Peary got to the place and hired the ship captain and said, yeah, I don't want anything on this ship that belongs to Cook. And they left it on the banks. And that's his proof and everything else. It's a great story. You should dig into that. So I'm gonna lean to believe Dr. Cook. In 1908, he actually reached the North Pole. And he did it, though, with a different map. It was a map that said the North Pole is not an open polar sea, but it's ice, it's solid ice. And it's constantly moving. And his crew actually succeeded in finding that spot. And here's the problem, the North Pole is constantly moving. So everybody that found it said they found it. They said, we found it, but it wasn't like a place you could plant a flag. And I mean, they tried, but it would move. It was constantly shifting. So who knows what we found until a modern era, until they were able to kind of establish some things. But he found it not necessarily because his crew was braver, stronger, more courageous, had more stamina, better people. He didn't have better equipment necessarily. He succeeded because he had a better map. He had a map that was based on better information. Can I tell you this morning, if you're following the wrong map, you can be the bravest person in the world, and you can still be wrong about the wilderness that you're navigating. I hear this more and more in our culture. We tend to very quickly exalt and laud people for being courageous, for being brave. And the problem is, they are within this bubble in the concept and in the perspective of culture, brave for doing, saying, being who they are, but they've got the wrong map. And they're more lost than anybody. And it doesn't make you brave and courageous to declare something when you declare you're somewhere and you've got the wrong map and you're really over here. So let me ask you this morning, what are your reference points? How do you ensure that you're not only are you pointed to true north, but that you know how to get there? And here's the problem. We can have a lot of different reference points if we're not careful. A lot of things can become our reference points. Our family, our cultural identity, our political party, our past hurts, our past scars, our past failures. I mean, pick any one of those things, if we're not careful, can become your reference point, and everything comes from that. And let me tell you, there's times, Nathan and I fight all the time. And I wasn't going to talk about him so much today, but he didn't come, so I'm going to talk about him. And that's not fair. They had to be out of their apartment. The lease was up, and they're moving all their stuff this weekend. So pray for him and Mackenzie. They're moving everything themselves, and it's a lot. They lived on a 3rd floor walk up. So by the time they got here about 2:30 this morning, they had been hauling furniture up and down 3 flights of stairs and then driving 3.5 hours. So they're pretty wiped out. So I said that because I made some random comment about him not being. That's why he's not here. But since he's not here, let's talk about it. Nathan constantly fight. We use my phone for maps, for finding our way around and making sure we know where we're going. I like, when I'm following the map on my phone, I like to always have my compass set to north, so I can see on the map. Like if it shows me on a map going this way, I know I'm headed west. I know I'm headed to right. I like to do that. It's just the way my brain works. Nathan likes to have his map set to where he's going straight up the phone and that doesn't matter. I'm headed straight. Like he likes to see the path he's taking. And then if he wants to know, he can look over here. Well, north is that way. That means I'm headed west. And I don't even understand how that works. But that's how he does it. And he's constantly fighting with me because he'll look over at where we headed somewhere, and he looks over and he goes, "Wait, why are we? Oh!" And he hits my little compass and switches it to where it's the direction we're going. I don't like it switched that way. I like my reference point to be true north. I like the reference point I like. And it can change. And there's times where I don't realize it, but he has been looking at my phone and he switches it and I didn't know it. Well, then there's times I'm like, wait, where am I? I shouldn't be going east. Oh, my compass is off. And I didn't realize it, but my compass was not set to true north. And it just throws me all off. Because I learned how to read a map, not a phone. And so that's how maps work. The map and north, that's how they work. You're looking at the map. I'm not a prisoner to my little follow the directions. And so that's the thing. And if we're not careful, we can have certain things in life as we're trying to navigate life. And if we get our reference point gets set the wrong direction, we can think we are moving exactly the way we're supposed to go. And we can be going the opposite wrong direction. We can be moving completely away. And we talk about fearing God. It's not just reverencing him, but it's referencing him. He's got to be our reference point. He's got to be the point, the thing that doesn't change. He's got to be the thing that is constant in our lives. Or else we're going to be moving astray. I say this all the time. If we use the fact that we have a standard means something. Now, most of us grew up with, this is going to make me sound really unintelligent, I guess. But is imperial? Is that inches, yards, miles? Is that imperial? That's just normal. Let's just call it normal. Most of us grew up with that, right? But then metric comes along. Now, I'll be honest with you. Metric is actually better. Don't fight me on that. It's actually easier. It's broken down. It's all a system of tens. It's easier to figure out. I don't have to sit and remember how many feet and how many. It is what it is. It's a division of tens. It's easier. But here's what really matters. If you were trying to measure something, or you're trying to, let's say, loosen a bolt, and what you're looking at is not standard, but it's metric, you're going to have the wrong reference point. So you can go by a number if you want. Well, I need a number 16. But is that metric or is that standard? Like what, it matters. Micah, do you deal with metrics at all? And yeah, just metrics, or do you have standards? So both. And it can be very frustrating. Somebody comes and they say, well, I need this. And what they're asking, and the problem is the reference point is the wrong reference point. They're talking a different language. They're talking this and that and the other. I had to go for my annual checkup on Tuesday, which is always fun when you're actually sick to go to your annual checkup. Because then they're like, well, how you been doing? Well, you want to know like this week or the last year? Right now I feel horrible, well, you know. And so I go in, and the thing I hate the most is that they call your name, and I walk back, and there's this big giant thing that I have to stand on. And these little numbers start going up and up and up and up and up and up and up, you know. And I'm glad they don't have one of those. Has anybody ever seen one of those talking scales that actually talks? There was a ladies' Weight Watchers meeting. I heard they got one of those for the first time, and it was going to be all this accountability because you couldn't like cheat and look at the number. You're going to stand on it, and it was going to. So the first lady got up there, and it said 135, and she went, "Oh, that's pretty good," you know, because I guess that was down. And then the next lady stood up, and for some reason they did the Weight Watchers thing, and I've never been to one of those, but they were doing it like, and it was. Towards the end, it was some of the ones that needed to lose more than anybody else. 123, 140. And finally, this last lady got up there, and she's like, okay. She got up there, and when she stood on it, it said, 1 at a time. So I'm glad it wasn't one of those. I'm glad it wasn't one of those scales that I was just looking at. But here's the problem. I went to stand on it, and I'm a little nervous because it's been a rough year. And by rough, it means I did a lot of cheating over this winter and didn't do a lot of running. And so I'm like, I know my weight is going to be up. I'm dreading this. I hate that moment. Why do we have to do this first off? Can we not work our way into this somehow, you know? And I get there, and I stand on there, and it goes 107.7. And I was like, sweet. I haven't been there since maybe, I don't know, second grade. That's pretty good. That's like... And the lady explained to me real quick, oh, that's kilograms. I can tell you what your real weight. I said, no, don't tell me. No, I'm going to stick with 107. But then I went and did the conversion. And I'm like, no, it's not where it needs to be. But here's the thing. If you have the wrong reference point, you can actually lie to yourself. I can tell myself, hey, 107, that's what I am. So anybody asks me, say, how's your appointment? How was your annual checkup? Man, I'm down to 107. Listen, when the reference point is a moving target, then you can make it whatever you want to be. We live in a culture that has done that. The reference points aren't fixed anymore. They're moving. They're everywhere. So when you say, well, how are you doing? I'm doing great. Because I have chosen to believe this, and I have embraced this reference point. And here's the problem. Most of us, I was going to hold up my phone, but it's actually right there recording me, so pretend this is just like a big phone. Most of us carry around the biggest reference point we have in life. And it can be a positive thing. We use it for everything. And so when I had to pick up those two brothers, Steel and Stone are with us this morning. I call them the Mineral Brothers. That's how I... Steel and Stone. Okay. That's a thinker. It's okay. When I had to pick them up and their flight got delayed a good, 5 hours? So when we were leaving D.C. last night, about 11:15, the traffic, believe it or not, in D.C., it's lighter at 11:15, but it's not non-existent. And getting out of that part over by Reagan National was just like, and I was glad I had that reference point. I was following it like a hawk. We got it here, and we got this, and it was kind of rainy, and and I'm just getting out of the city, making sure I made all them right turns, and getting this one and that one, And I made the mistake. I started sightseeing with them like I've never been there before. It's the same place we go get Meredith all the time. But I'm picking them up and I'm like, hey, and they used to live there, so it's not like there's something new to them. And I'm picking up like, oh, hey, that's the Pentagon. Oh, there's our church. It's like I got caught up in all the, all the sightseeing. But I was glad I had that reference point. Sometimes it can be a good thing. But the problem is it opens up pathways to things that can be where the content is exactly what somebody wants you to read and know and think. And if we're not careful and we use this reference point in our lives as if it were truth, and we rely on this. Listen, I read this quote by you talk about wisdom, Mark Twain. There's this quote I read the other day. Mark Twain said that 85% of the things on the internet are probably not to be trusted. And if Mark Twain said that, I have to believe that that's probably true. But listen, there's so many things like that. If we're not careful, we can have that reference point set in our life. And it can become a destructive thing because we lean on that and not on the truth of God's word or who he is. And that's why that reverence part is so important. Not only is he our reference point, let's close with this. He is our worldview. You hear us talk a lot about a Christian worldview. He is our worldview. When we talk about referencing him, it means he is the view. He is the way we see things. He is the filter we should see everything through. There are three directional reference points that determine our worldview. And for this example, I'm going to use these three. There's an inward direction, an outward direction, and an upward direction. Now, you'll hear us talk a lot about, especially because scriptures are written from an Eastern mindset, the idea of a Western mindset, Eastern mindset, and that's still kind of pretty true. Those things still, even though the world's getting flatter and bigger and more global, that still exists for the most part. A Western mindset, when it comes to those three directions, a Western mindset begins by looking inward. We are told, in a Western mindset, we're told we should look inward to discover who we truly are, to discover what our purpose is, what we're supposed to do. We need to find, matter of fact, have you ever met somebody that just quit everything and walked away because they had to go find themselves? Because a Western mindset is we got to look inward. We got to find who we are. We got to discover who we are. Then the next direction is outward. We go outward to seek affirmation, encouragement from the people around us, to support the truth, the identity, the thing that we found inside. And then if you are a person of faith and want to believe that, you might look upward for support and guidance to live out what you've discovered about yourself. Well, in that basic Western mindset, here's the problem with that. What we prioritize most in that mindset, what we're praised for, what we're lauded for, the courage and bravery, is speaking our truth. What we have discovered about ourselves. Everything else is to support and uplift and encourage the discovery, the self-discovery. Here's what Jeremiah said about that. Jeremiah 17:9. The human heart is the most deceitful of all things and desperately wicked. Who really knows how bad it is? That's not something we should trust. And to go there first is probably not a great idea. In fact, Proverbs 28:26 says this: those who trust their own insight are foolish, but anyone who walks in wisdom is safe. In other words, going there, starting there is probably a bad move. Matter of fact, the book of Judges in a couple of different places, it uses this expression to describe how bad and depraved and completely rotten the culture had gotten at different times under different kings in the book of Judges. And here's the expression it uses. It says things had gotten so bad that everyone did what they deemed right in their own eyes. Can I modernize that a little bit? If we were reading the book of Judges today, it would say things were so bad, everybody was expressing their truth. It was what we thought was right. All right, so Western mindset, problematic. Let's look at an Eastern mindset. An Eastern mindset flips the first two. In an Eastern mindset, your first look is outward. Your identity, your expectations of what you're supposed to do. It's not something you discover for yourself. It is handed to you by your family, by your culture, by your community. You are told, this is what you are to do. This is what you are here for. This is who you are to be. And everything, your neighborhood, your culture, your everything around you, who you are is received externally. It's told to you that way. Then, after you've been raised and brought up to tell who you are to be, then you look inward for that affirmation and resolve in order to live out those expectations that were put on you by all of those other external outputs. And then if you're a person of faith, you might look upward for guidance and support. And here's the problem with that. That means who you are and your identity, everything is wrapped up. It can be a moving target. Your identity, your creativity, everything else can change with the current mores, norms of the culture that you're around and you're in. So if you happen to be a part of a culture that is more modern, that is a little more progressive, that is a little more and they've changed some of those old-fashioned ways, they might push on you something that's more progressive and more modern and more, but you're always getting it from outside. It can move too much, so it's problematic. Can I propose to you that whether east or west, we need a fear of the Lord mindset? And this is what the wisdom literature is getting at. It's saying you need to fear the Lord. The fear of the Lord mindset means that our first move isn't inward or outward, it's upward. When you fear the Lord, you reverence Him and you reference Him. He is your reference point. He is the source, the point of all of your reverence. So you look upward first. You look upward to God first and foremost to tell you who you are and who you're supposed to be and what you're supposed to do. You find your identity not in seeking yourself, not in being told by your community, but by seeking God and Him saying, this is who you were created to be. This is your identity. This is who you are and what you're supposed to do. This is your purpose. Then, once we have discovered from God who we are, then we look simultaneously, both outward and inward. We look inward for conviction from the Holy Spirit, of which we are a temple in where He resides. We look inward for conviction from the Holy Spirit, peace of heart and mind, not a wicked, deceitful heart, but a heart that is controlled and inhabited by the Spirit, to bear witness with our spirit. And at the same time, we look outward for accountability, for encouragement, for affirmation from others in the body of Christ. It works both in tandem together. Here's the great thing about a fear of God mindset. It doesn't stop there, because just like we start by looking upward, we end by taking all of that and we look back up to God, so that He is both the first say in who we are and the final say and the filter for what everybody else says. That's referencing God in all we say and do. That's referencing God. It is literally, to me, referencing God is can I describe it best? It's a verse we read in week 1. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. But in all your ways, acknowledge Him. Reference Him. Make Him your reference point. And then what? He will direct your paths. It is the very definition of that. We've got to reverence God, knowing who He is, living like we believe it. We've got to reference God, knowing that He is our anchor, our reference point, and He is our worldview. We fear God that way. Fearing God in that way leads us to love Him even more, which ironically When we love God out of a fear of the Lord mindset, that's the love that James or John in 1 John 4:18 is talking about when he says perfect love casts out all fear. Because when we have a fear of the Lord, it actually will remove, because it leads us to love him more, it will actually remove all those other fears that are not healthy, that are not supposed to be in our lives, that are not supposed to be there. Perfect love expels all fear. It doesn't just happen until we learn to walk in the fear of the Lord in complete reverence with him as our reference point. Because the reality is this: when you do something well, whether it's your job, your occupation, a hobby, or whatever it is, there are always elements to whatever it is that you do that you have to learn a healthy fear if you want to be good at it. I've seen my own kids at times where they wanted to jump into something, but they hadn't had the experience to do what it was, and they had not discovered a good healthy. I was talking to somebody this week, or actually it was a couple of weeks ago, and they were talking about they like to kayak, and I asked them, and they were talking about rapids, and I said, "Do you kayak?" And they said, "Well, no, I do a flat kayak that you sit on top." And I said, "So you're not in like a river kayak where you sit down in a little, is it called a bib? I guess that it attaches to you. You wear it, and then it snaps and it seals you into the little kayak." He said, "No, I've not done any of those." And that's the kind I've seen in when I've been rafting on a river. I've seen those guys. But when you train to do that, because in the river, and you're in that kayak, I mean, you're a part of the boat. And there are times you hit those swells and those rivers, and you'll see them, and they'll flip completely upside down. And then whoop, whoop, they come pop up the other side. And it always takes I find myself, I'm watching them do that, and I'm not breathing. Because when they flip upside down, I'm like holding my breath for them or something. I can somehow hold my breath for them. But it makes me nervous because I'm not comfortable with that. And I was talking to this guy about that. He said, I want to do that. But before you can do that, you've got to train enough to where you understand. And he said, those guys will actually train in a pool where they'll strap themselves in and they'll flip up with somebody there that can help. They'll flip upside down in the water to see if they can get back up. And here, I asked him, I said, "Yeah, I would just be afraid." He said, "Well, yeah, you've got to, it's not about conquering the fear, but it's about having a natural, healthy fear for doing something. You've got to have a healthy fear to do this." I remember somebody showed me when Annie and I first got married, we moved down into South Georgia, and I had sinned or something. I don't know what happened, but God, I had to do something. I had to work down there for a while. And so when I got there, they were building the building, and they were kind of doing it themselves. And so there was a licensed electrician. He was the electrician on record, but it was a church, and we had I don't know how many outlets in this big building. And he said, "We got to get all these outlets wired." He said, "Let me show you how to do one, and I'll come and check." And so he showed me how to do it. Well, they were also doing other work. And I said, "So how are they working?" Because I could hear the saws and stuff running. And he said, "Well, the power's on." He said, I'll show you how to do it, though. It's real simple. You just put this here and screw that there, tuck that in there, pop, pop. And he did it in about 2 seconds. Put that in and screw the outlet in. Well, that was pretty easy. I think I could do that. I did not have a healthy fear for what would happen if my screwdriver touched both that wire and that other wire at the same time. Now, it only took once. But the first time because I didn't have a fear of it, I watched him do it and I was like, "Oh, I can do that. That's easy." And I wasn't afraid. The problem was I also wasn't careful. I wasn't trying to be super cautious either. I thought, "Oh, that was easy. Let me do that." And I said, "Beep, beep, beep, beep." Pow! Screwdriver went flying out of my hand. I could smell something on fire. It wasn't me. It was like I could smell that singed, burning smell in the air, and I thought, okay. And my heart's doing this. I'm like, whoo, okay, I don't want that to happen again. And it was amazing how much better I got at it when I was more cautious and understood the danger that I was in, because I needed some level of fear to understand this can really hurt me if I do it wrong. I was telling Annie about this when I got home that day, and she said, or you could have, turned off the breaker where you were working. I said, well, yeah, but he didn't do that. I wasn't going to be like, I'll do this, but we got to find the breaker first and turn. He was working, but he had developed, he understood the danger of what it is. Listen, you can't truly love doing something unless you understand and have a natural fear of what it is. I know for a fact some of you have an unhealthy fear of things. Like, you don't really know about certain things that slither and do those sort of things. All you know is, I don't want to see one. It needs to be dead. And so you don't work well around those. You just sort of like, nope, I know enough to kill it. I know that. And I've seen other people that know about, and they'll like, oh no, that's a good. I don't understand that concept. That's a good snake. I don't. And that's a good one. And they'll grab it and pick it up, and they're just like, it's a good, whatever. But the thing is, it's not that they're careless. They understand. They have a healthy fear. They know what to be afraid of, what not to be afraid of. They understand it. You see what I'm getting at? Those two things have to work hand in hand. And that's why it's so important that if we're going to walk in the fear of the Lord, we know Him. We know who He is. Or else, if we're not careful, we wind up with either a reference point that is purely religious and we are afraid of, and we don't act out of obedience because we're in love and a relationship with Him, but we are scared to death to do something wrong. That's not how God designed it. That's not the fear of the Lord. It is a fear that knows Him, that understands Him, that understands who He is, how powerful He is, how powerful and holy His name is. When we can understand who He is, and it creates a love in us that we don't obey His commands in some effort to accomplish something, but as in a privilege of, we get the opportunity and privilege to walk in obedience. And we walk in a fearful respect and honor. That's the fear of the Lord the Proverbs talks about, that brings long life and rewards and riches, honor. That's where we need to be. And the thing is, I don't know where any of us are today. Maybe you're in a place where you'll admit, hey, I love God and stuff, but it's really, I'm just afraid. I'm afraid of who He is, and I have a fear of Him, but you're missing the relationship. It's all reverence and no relationship. Or maybe you love Him and you're having a relationship, but you've got so many different reference points that you're really not walking in fear of Him. You're walking in some kind of misguided thing where you say you're a Christian, but you live like an atheist. I would encourage all of you, no matter where you are in your journey, whether you're at a starting point and you need to get to know Him, you need to say, I need to know you now. I need to know you because I don't want to be afraid of you. I want to understand your love, but I also want to walk in that reverential fear of the Lord that is talked about. Maybe you've walked with Him and you know Him, but you will admit there's some reference points that have crept into my life and I've allowed them to mess up true north a little bit. And I need to make Him the reference point. Wherever you are in your journey, I pray today that you will find Him in any way that you've got to, that will help you to walk in the fear of the Lord. Will you bow your heads with me? Father, we thank You for the incredible opportunity we have to walk in obedience, in loving, reverential, worshipful fear. God, a fear that actually wipes out other fear, a fear that increases our love for you, a fear that comes out of a place, a worldview that sees you as a reference for everything we do in every aspect of our lives. Help us today, first of all, to reverence you, to honor you, to worship you, to bring you glory in everything we do, whether we eat or drink or whatever we do. Help us to bring you glory. Help us to work like it's all for you and not for anybody else. Help us not to care what people think about us, but what they think about you through us. And Lord, help us to have a point of reference and a worldview that puts you first, that puts you as the filter that we see everything through, so that we may walk in the fear of the Lord today. Lord, I pray for those that are making that decision, maybe for the first time, to get to know you. They can't reverence what they don't know. Lord, I pray today that they'll make you the authority in their life that they revere, that they will admit that without you they're a sinner, that they need you in their lives. And they'll ask you to be the Lord, the authority in their life, to forgive them of the sin in their life as you become Lord. Help those of us that claim you as Lord to walk in the fear of the Lord as we get rid of the false reference points that we've allowed to creep into our lives, or the things that have stolen glory from you and misplaced you because we've given them higher priority, or we somehow have turned them into things that we honor above and beyond who you are. Help us today, God, to learn to walk in your fear, a fear that helps us to love not only you but others. We thank you, Father.